welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Let's talk One Piece, specifically the Punk Hazard arc from the Dressrosa Saga. Now, we arrive at the New World with a very harrowing adventure and also following in the wake of some wonderful whales, reminding us of Laboon. Specifically, Brook is reminded of his buddy that he is on a quest to reunite with. But there is this call to Punk Hazard where the island is shrouded in some kind of mystery with lots of disaster and menace looming, and this horrific accident from 4 years prior, turning it into an uninhabitable or supposedly uninhabitable desolation, with the added element of it also being the location where Aokiji and Akainu had their battle for supremacy, leaving the island half ice and half fire. I mean, you couldn't have a more unhospitable location, I suppose. Also, I just want to say I was so excited when we met a dragon, and even though it turned out to be only a creation of Dr. Vegapunk, and also even though the Straw Hats ended up eating the dragon, which I was at first mildly disappointed, but then it was good for some laughs, especially when Brownbeard later on warns the Straw Hats about this perilous, terrible, dangerous dragon, and Zoro is in his head is thinking, well, we already ate it. So lots of good laughs in this particular arc. I actually had a great time reading Punk Hazard. Lots of weird stuff, just fun stuff, goofy stuff as per usual in One Piece. I mean, a pair of legs that's running around, or a talking head belonging to a samurai from Wano. That's just good stuff. Also, plenty of potential crewmates for Luffy. The weirder, the better, right? For as far as Luffy is concerned. But yeah, just had a good time with the laughs and the shenanigans in this one. And the Straw Hats, I gotta shout this out. The Straw Hats being in each other's bodies due to Trafalgar Law's switching them around through his devil fruit powers, with the later on using the little hats with the faces on there. I mean, that was great comedy for the most part. I had a great time with that. And just so they could remember who's who, putting on the little hats. And also the lovable Frankie Tang song. I love that part. Frankie always gets the sentimental side of me going, and or Zoro being directionally challenged. That gag is always good for me. There are certainly some gags that I don't care for as much. Let's just say that I'm not really interested in Nami's bra size and things of that nature that seem to be taking over SBS. But there's plenty of other things to love here. Lots of the usual action, lots of displays of power from those 2 years of training, and also, for me, most importantly, the serious themes that actually elevate One Piece to a timeless, beautiful, and emotionally resonant masterpiece. So I'm going to focus on these themes mostly during my commentary today. One of them being the sort of cynical manipulation of followers by narcissistic frauds who gain positions of power, and also why people follow such frauds, why they follow such leaders, and what it might take for people to open their eyes to what these people really are. And then another one that I think One Piece handles beautifully, I'm going to call it, broadly speaking, compassion. And this is something that you see facets of it in the friendships, in the loyalty, and in the sacrifice. And this is, I think, one of the most beautiful parts about One Piece for me, is its exploration of compassion. And hand in hand with that is its exploration of morality, and particularly justice, but the idea of honor among pirates, and finding morality in places where you might not expect it, and finding disappointing views of morality among those who should be doing better. But yeah, it's I think a consistent exploration in One Piece of a sort of black and white morality versus a worldview of grays that can acknowledge that everybody is actually flawed in some way or other, and that individuals can exhibit morality, even when we don't expect certain individuals to do so, that everyone is capable of good and everyone is capable of evil. So let's begin with the cynical manipulation by leaders who are frauds and exploitative. And of course, the primary example in this particular arc is Caesar Clown, who lies about Vegapunk. And I'm actually still very intrigued by this Vegapunk figure. I feel like, speaking of, moral complexity, there are aspects of this scientist that make me think, oh, this is a terrible human being. How could he possibly develop such horrible forces and unleash them on the world? And on the other hand, it seems like he's not as bad as many times people make him out to be, that there's more complexity to this. So I'll be interested. I haven't really actually even met Vegapunk yet, so I'll be curious to see what happens. But anyway, Caesar Clown, he poses as this benevolent master. The word master should be a tip-off to most people that there's some major ego involved in this character. And he uses his followers, exploits his followers. He even uses children for experiments to make giant soldiers. Now, that was not just his project. That was a government project that Vegapunk seems to have been involved in as well. So it's not just him, but I think he takes it to a perfidious and disgusting extreme by essentially kidnapping kids and pretending that they've been, lost at sea or whatever, and getting them addicted to this candy. This is the ultimate, disgusting, horrible thing to do something like that to innocents. It's just there are no words for someone who is willing to go along or perpetrate such a scheme. And you can see that someone like him can do things like that because of their ego, because they are narcissists. They are simply, are they incapable of understanding that other humans have feelings, that other creatures around them suffer? Or are they just, it's hard for me to understand people like that, but they do exist. And often they do worm their way into positions of power. And this is the world we are in. It seems that other people often worship power and worship people who get into positions of power. It's like there's some weird psychological need to have a strong father figure so people don't feel afraid. They feel that that person is protecting them. And that may go a long way to explain how people allow themselves to be duped, to be fooled by these frauds, these cult leaders. And these leaders, even when they're just jealous and insecure and kind of pathetic people, they're able to rely on people's ignorance. And often that ignorance is even self-imposed, but their forgetfulness of history. And that is something that Caesar remarks on himself. He says it, man soon forgets the tragedies of his past. And certainly narcissistic types of fascist leaders rely on the amnesia, the collective amnesia of societies, that people forget the atrocities of history. And we keep repeating the same stupid things and getting the same types of people in positions of power. But I mean, Caesar is a really fantastic portrayal of that, in fact. And these people, they have no respect for the people who follow them. They see them simply as pawns, as expendable, as something to exploit. And knowing their need for a benevolent paternal figure, they cultivate this dependence on them, and they create a cult essentially. And that is what Caesar does in this arc. You really do see that. And even when he calls them expendable lowlifes to their faces, they find a way to twist their heads and essentially keep worshiping, because you turn off your brain when you're worshiping somebody like that. And there's nothing rational about it. So as astounding as it might seem that the people keep following, these frauds, it happens. So it's a really fascinating exploration we're getting here. It is something that you also see, I think, a really good insight in that leaders like that rely on fear, big time. This is how they maintain their power. They exploit fear and they foster fear in their followers. And you see that most certainly in Caesar. People like Caesar exploit our innate fear and offer a false kind of protection by saying, here, I can give you the weapons to make yourself safe. You can arm yourself to the teeth, and then no one can touch you. Now, the reason that is false is that other people can acquire such weapons as well, and you get into what's essentially an arms race, and no one is immune from harm. But it is the fear that keeps people like that in power. And it assures this delusion that we can achieve safety and even peace through force and through weapons and through dominating others. And this is where I believe you see how fear is in opposition to hope. I'm going to talk about hope later on because we do see it amongst the Straw Hats. But fear is the opposite of hope in so many ways. But you see this manifestation, a kind of even a great metaphor for all of this fear and this exploitation and this egocentric poison that is cast out into the world by people like Caesar. In Smiley slash the Land of the Dead, when Smiley becomes poison gas, it's Land of the Dead through ingesting this artificial devil fruit. But this is a manifestation of egocentric poison that would swallow everything in its path. The illusion that somehow this makes me safe is brought forward by the fact that this thing will destroy everything in its path. And that is what weapons do. They destroy, they kill. That's what they're designed to do. And the fact of the matter is that narcissistic leaders like Caesar will throw even their most loyal followers into the path of their destruction. They'll throw them right under the bus, and they'll use all kinds of doublespeak and lies along the way. Again, like achieving peace through the use of horrific weapons, using phrases like collateral damage to disguise the fact that innocent people, children are dying. Children are dying and being exploited. And these people don't care in the least, and they will cover up their crimes, their atrocities, through the use of doublespeak, by lying and manipulating. And it is, I have to confess, a very satisfying moment when Luffy punches this dude in the face. Luffy, who simply has no regard for the kind of threats that somebody like Caesar would come up with. Oh, you're going to be in big trouble. Luffy has no respect for that kind of nonsense and sees right through people like Caesar, sees through their BS. And I have to admit, it was a very satisfying moment when Luffy gives him what's coming. To see that huge ego and that arrogance get a little bit dented there. I also need to comment on SAD, or SAD, which I think is a very cleverly titled weapon, if you will. And it is what yields Smile, is how Doflamingo is depending on Caesar, needs Caesar to create this SAD, which will yield the Smile, which is the devil fruit that is providing this army of devil fruit users. This is really bad news, of course, for everybody, and probably even for the subjects who are apparently taking this artificial devil fruit. But I think it's a very cleverly titled thing that something called SAD would lead to a smile, and perhaps very appropriate for somebody like Doflamingo to be involved in all of this. He does seem to enjoy his smiling. I also want to comment on Vergo, and this guy pretending to be a part of G5, covering up the abduction of children. Once again, he may seem a bit ridiculous at times with his, sandwich or spoon, whatever, stuck to his face, which I don't know what that gag is all about. It is kind of funny, I admit. But this guy, all the while is really working for Doflamingo and is participating in these atrocities. So he's another example of a fraud, essentially, and Doflamingo himself. So yeah, he's the big baddie here behind the scenes. And I already know, quite formidable. I know this from the Marineford arc. This dude is dangerous. He's scary, and I don't think I know enough to completely figure out Doflamingo, but I think I'm gonna see more of him in the next arc. But for now, I think he's probably somebody you don't really want to mess with very much, and seems to be a force of chaos as well. Like this guy, he is a loose cannon, and it's a little difficult to tell what he's up to, but I'm interested in seeing more. Now let's talk about what makes One Piece really special to me, and that is this theme of compassion and friendship, often even seeing foes becoming friends, like Tashigi and Zoro. I love what Oda is exploring there as they meet several times and they come to an understanding that Tashigi understands Zoro in ways that probably even his friends don't, but also along with the friendship and compassion, loyalty, and sacrifice. Uh, Oda does these magnificently in One Piece, and this arc is no exception. You have the moment when Sanji, one of my favorite Sanji moments in this one really is his resolution to help Kinemon. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names. As you may know, if you've been following me, I don't look them up to avoid spoilers on the internet. And I don't watch the anime for the most part, so I'm hearing these names in my head only. But you can correct me if you want. But Kinemon, the samurai from Wano, who is initially we meet in pieces, literally, but Sanji resolving to help him as Kinemon reveals that his whole purpose is to rescue his son, Momonosuke. Is that how you say that? Momonosuke. Even at a certain point, Sanji risks his own life and actually Nami's body, because at this point he's in Nami's body, to rescue Kinemon's torso, that part of him. The last part they need to get is the torso because his head has been reunited with his legs. But he risks his life diving in the lake, in order to, and Sanji's great because he's pretending to be annoyed by this guy the whole time, and he's pretending to dislike him, and maybe he does dislike him, but it is so cool to see his compassion. And of course, he doesn't want people to know he's compassionate because it might make him seem somehow weaker or something. But he is compassionate, in his resolution to help this wayward samurai. And yeah, I think that's just beautiful. And he wins Kinemon's loyalty in return. And that's very important as well. And I'm sure down the road, there's going to be some consequences for this Wan loyalty, for this friendship, if you will, where again, it's like Sanji and Zoro always pretending to hate each other when really there's this deep, beautiful bond between them. Another huge moment for me is when Nami resolves to rescue the children, and her compassion, her obvious compassion for them, is one of the more beautiful moments in this whole arc, in my opinion. She is also the one who I think convinces the others that this is what they ought to do. It begins with Nami and it quickly spreads to all the other members of the Straw Hat crew, that this becomes their real ultimate purpose there in Punk Hazard. And also Chopper. You see it in Chopper as well. He's also one of the more overtly compassionate members of the Straw Hat crew. And Chopper's compassion for the children, especially Mocha. And this is something that I think Oda does really well here, is the introduction of this Mocha character, who is one of these kids who has been turned into a giant and has been addicted to this candy. But Chopper is able to reach Mocha before any of the others. And you see in Chopper's interaction with the children how this dilemma of how to help someone without hurting them in this case. And it's a really interesting position for Chopper to be in as a doctor, but also just as a compassionate individual. And sometimes there are people you will meet in your life who are hurting so much, who are experiencing such difficulty, that it is not a simple thing to offer compassion to them. So I think that's a really interesting thing that Oda does here. And then, of course, Mocha. I mentioned her a moment ago. Her beautiful sacrifice for her fellow children, her friends, so that they can at least achieve this dream of freedom and getting back to their parents. She sacrifices herself. She eats the poison, essentially, to prevent them from going back to it, to save them from themselves. This is such a selfless act that is ironically interpreted in the short term by the other children as being selfish. Hey, you ate all the candy. So it's just interesting how you have characters like Caesar who can do horribly selfish, awful things, and his followers interpret them as somehow being altruistic. And then you have characters who are genuinely compassionate and beautiful, like Mocha, whose actions get misinterpreted It seems like a world where these things can happen that we happen to live in. And then we have the Straw Hats themselves, and I love, as always, how they believe in each other here. There's a wonderful moment where Zoro actually pushes Luffy to not be careless. You can see Zoro's belief in Luffy, but a kind of a firm reminder, hey, be serious here. We've got a serious thing to do. We got to save these children. And so no messing up this time. And of course, Luffy takes that very seriously. And I love Zoro's role as he occasionally takes that position of reminding Luffy, don't be a goofball here. This is important. And we see Luffy step up every time. So that is fantastic. And then also Usopp expresses. I love some of the Usopp moments here, and I love how he expresses the Straw Hats' belief in their captain, in Luffy. And he expresses it beautifully as hope. This is the difference. This is what I was talking about earlier. The difference between fear and hope. Fear is false. Fear is full of lies. It is manipulative. Fear results in anger and in violence, whereas hope, it builds. Hope expresses belief. It affirms. Hope means that we are inspired. And that is a positive. That is a very different thing. And you see that when Usopp expresses it perfectly, his belief in Luffy and in his fellow crew members is the opposite of fear and cynicism. And Luffy gives it back as well when he shows faith in Usopp and in Nami when they are trying to prevent Caesar's escape, when Usopp is using his marksman skills and Nami is using her weather powers and everything else to prevent Caesar from escaping. And Luffy's like, I told you so. I love that, that they have faith in each other. And because of that faith, they are able to elevate themselves. They're able to meet that expectation of faith. And that is one of the beautiful things about Luffy, is that he sees the best in people, and then people raise themselves in order to live up to Luffy's view of them. And I think that is just fantastic. There are also some really great foes to friends moments in here where you have the Straw Hats working with Trafalgar Law, of course, or Traffy, as Luffy calls him, and Smoker and G5 as well, of course. They all end up, beginning as enemies and ending up as allies, working together for the common good, for the sake of these children. Brownbeard, he has an eye-opening experience. I'm going to talk about him in a bit as well. But he is part of this alliance, which I think is fantastic. He plays a role in a crucial moment. All of them are working together to save these kids. And also there's some other moments where the G5 soldiers work to save Tashigi. You see their genuine affection, their love for their leader there. And that is something that is reciprocated by Smoker and by Tashigi. I want to talk about that as well. You see Zoro holding back when he encounters Monet and not using his haki, which he could have done if he wanted to actually kill her. So compassion coming from Zoro. Again, he's like Sanji. He prefers people not to know that he is compassionate, but you can see it. Which leads to this theme of morality and a sort of black and white view of morality versus an acknowledgement of the grays, the acknowledgement that we all have good and evil within us. And you see this most certainly in, for example, Smoker, who is he is passionate about pursuing justice, about doing his job as a representative of the Navy. And on the other hand, he is capable of kind of looking the other way sometimes. But you really see his passion for his soldiers, for their lives. And that definitely you'll see it at times override his role as an enforcer of justice. In that he does form an alliance with pirates in order to save his men, in order to save the children. And so that is something beautiful. And I also love how Tashigi plays a role in that. She is, in a way, Smoker's conscience, I think. She's his better half, in a way, reminding him of what's right often. And I love how Nami shows faith in Tashigi as well. She feels good about leaving the children with G5 because of Tashigi, and Tashigi reminding Nami of her mother. Beautiful little moment there. But also the G5 soldiers themselves. Now, you do have some people in G5, like this guy, we don't see a lot of him, but Yari Sugi, who doesn't show any compassion whatsoever. In fact, he shows brutality where there should be compassion to the people who have lost their children. But most of the G5 soldiers, who are, they're a bunch of ruffians, they're a bunch of rejects. They're they're not the elite of the Navy by any means, right? But they are capable of compassion and love and loyalty, and it's really quite beautiful. There's that wonderful moment where they pretend to hate the Straw Hats, even near the end, where they're taking away the children, and they are disparaging the Straw Hats. And you realize that they're doing that so that they don't have to acknowledge how much they love these roguish pirates, which they're not supposed to love, but they have formed this bond through their common goal of fighting Caesar and saving the children. Also, a great character where you can see this is Brownbeard, and how he does have his eyes opened because he is presented with evidence. Now, not everybody who's presented with evidence about the evil of the person they thought was their hero can change their minds. A lot of people will just find ways, to keep worshiping that leader, but not Brownbeard. Once his eyes are open, he admits he was wrong, which takes a lot of courage to do. It is something that a lot of people struggle to do because it's you have to shift a lot of your view of things in order to admit you were wrong about someone. But it is also his loyalty to his men that leads him to this conclusion. He understands what Caesar is doing to his men, that he sees them as expendable pawns and even is recklessly throwing away their lives. And you can see that Brownbeard, even though he is a pirate with pretty dubious morals, he is loyal to his followers, and he has moments of protecting and even vitally helping the Straw Hats. And I can't forget that he serves as admirable public transportation for for the Straw Hats. Much to his objection, they're all sitting on his back while he's running for his life. So some good comedy there with Brownbeard as well. But the character where I really see this is Trafalgar Law. Fascinating character, maybe my favorite character now in this arc as developed. I think there's some really cool grays in this character. On the one hand, you can see he's up to something. He's kind of self-serving. He is definitely a pirate, but and he knows about the children even. Okay, so that's not good, right? He knows about the children. He's allowing this to happen because he's got some scheme, and he is working with Caesar. And now I don't know if he had any intention of ever freeing these children if the Straw Hats had not come along. Maybe he would have somehow just ignored them. But yeah, so there's that, and then there's what he says to Shigi. He says the weak do not have the right to choose how they die. And that's pretty harsh. And, is that a posture he's putting on? Is that a pose? I don't know. But there is that side of him, that exploitative, piratical side of him. And I'm not sure I really even trust him in his alliance with the Straw Hats. But he does show loyalty to Luffy. He has saved Luffy before. And he even allows Luffy's choices, which aren't part of his plan, which could even inconvenience his plan. He allows Luffy's choices and even supports them at times. And Luffy himself remarks how Trafalgar Law is like Jimbei. So Luffy sees something good in this guy. And I think by now we've all learned to trust Luffy's judgment. That suggests to me that Trafalgar Law has the potential for good, that there is a side of him that does have compassion. But it is still fun to see how Luffy drags him willy-nilly into his adventures and into helping the others. It's cool because Trafalgar Law is a doctor and he is a pirate. And you see that dual aspect in him because a doctor, of course, is about saving lives, about helping people. But he's also a pirate with some scary devil fruit powers and uses those powers to literally take away people's hearts. And also uses those powers to heal because he heals the children from their addiction in the end. But he also allows Monet, for example, to die, knowing that he has given this heart to Caesar. Now, Caesar thinks it is Smoker's heart, but you have to think that Trafalgar Law would have figured out that Caesar was going to do something bad with that heart, and indeed he does. And of course, it turns out to be very timely because Monet was about to blow up everybody. So it's a bit of cleverness on his part, but shows a kind of ruthlessness too. So there's a lot of facets to this character, Trafalgar Law, and I find him to be a really compelling character. I want to see more of this character. Hopefully, I'm pretty sure we will in Dressrosa, because he's right there with this alliance with Luffy. And then speaking of Monet, this is another character where you see some serious loyalty, in this case to Doflamingo. Now she is serving Caesar, but I think that is by orders of Doflamingo, and even shows a willingness to die for Doflamingo. He says, "Die for me," and she's ready to do it until her heart gets stabbed by Caesar. But there is something tragic about her, that loyalty to me. Seeing that as a consequence of, again, this delusional, this cult-like following of a leader who maybe doesn't deserve that kind of loyalty. Can loyalty, in other words, be a bad thing? And there are these dual sides of loyalty that are explored in this arc, where you have loyalty to a cult-like, deceitful leader, and that seems like a bad thing, that kind of loyalty. But then you have the loyalty that the Straw Hats show each other, the genuine loyalty, where you believe in each other and you lift up each other. And you have the friendship. So it's the cult-like thing versus the friendship. And again, the moral complexity here, we see it when Aokiji shows up. Or Kuzan, I guess he's just Kuzan now because he's no longer in the Navy. But he rescues Smoker. And he does it saying, "Hey, this is my friend." He's saying this to Doflamingo, who is about to kill Smoker. And Kuzan shows up and prevents that. And even though he himself is no longer part of the Navy, he feels loyalty to friends that he made in the Navy, like Smoker. And he knows that Smoker is essentially a decent human being, a good human being, does not deserve to die that way. And I certainly do hope to see more of Aokiji in the future. So as usual, there's some just incredible thematic exploration in Oda's masterpiece here. And some exciting things to come, obviously. There's this plan to take down one of the four emperors, somebody named Kaido. I haven't met yet, but sounds like a scary dude. And in fact, Luffy has peculiar ideas about what an alliance means, and he even himself seems to have more ambitions about, "I'm going to take down all four emperors," as long as Shanks is not the first one, right? It'll be curious to me to see that meeting, that long-awaited meeting between Luffy and Shanks, when Luffy feels like he is ready to take down all four emperors. But he doesn't believe in betrayal from Trafalgar Law because he basically has faith in his crew. He thinks they will always have his back. So maybe he's not quite as naively trusting as he may appear. But yeah, he's going to take down all four of them, and that's going to be interesting. But Traffy and Luffy, well, they're allies now, and they're big new players on this stage, the new world. They are, as Trafalgar Law puts it, they're kind of destroying the gears here. They are themselves, they've become a formidable presence here. And they're making their inroads, and they are a genuine threat. You also see some other alliances going on simultaneously. Some of the other newbies on the scene are getting together, the Captain Kids of the world and the others there. And you have some, big powers, obviously, these four emperors. But yeah, for now, Luffy and Traffy have outfoxed Doflamingo. Maybe because they got Doflamingo to abdicate his throne in Dressrosa and to no longer be one of the seven warlords. So yeah, what's going to happen here in Dressrosa? I don't know, but I am very excited to find out as we head there. But that is it from me for now. Until next time.